How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Well, welcome, folks. Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show right here. We are just getting over this huge blizzard. We have so much snow. It is remarkable. And yet, all these folks have come together, shovel each other's driveways, help each other out. I mean, that's the kind of community that we have. There is no ice here. Well, there is a lot of ice, but it's snow and ice. But we're just grateful to be here every day. It's always an I am. And we are influenced by so many different things, our home domain, our social domain, biological, the IC. But what really runs through a thread across the world and across communities, and we haven't really spoken about this before, folks, is money. Money. Let's just think about that for a moment. And that's what we're talking about tonight. We have an incredible guest tonight who has written a wonderful book, The Emotional Side of Money, a roadmap to financial wellness. Let me just read a little bit about our guest tonight. Tari K. Vickery is the author of The Emotional Side of Money with over 25 years of experience managing the full spectrum of her clients' financial lives, everything from accounting and bill payment to coordinating with wealth managers, estate attorneys, and insurance agencies. Tari brings an unmatched real-world perspective to the emotional side of money. Her sociology degree from Stanford and lived experience through dramatic personal financial shifts give her a rare blend of academic insight and deep empathy. Her authenticity and hands-on expertise resonate with readers across generations, making her voice both trustworthy and transformational. Folks, it is my honor to introduce Tari K. Vickery. Welcome to the Dr.
Thank
Joe Show.
you. Thank you. I'm so looking forward to chatting with you.
I am delighted. And, I think everybody has some relationship with money. How did you get the idea to write about the emotional side of money?
Well, it came from growing up poor
Mm.
and having a very young mother who was far too young to be having children and experiencing a lot of agony around money my entire life. And then in my work world, I work with people for whom even thinking about money is often painful. People who don't want to open their mail. And it's not because they don't have the money to pay the bills that are inside the mail. It's because it creates so much angst that they just don't even want to be bothered with it. And yet, as you say, it is prevalent and we have to be bothered with it. And so in observing my own experience as well as that of others, I felt like there was a need to help people understand they're not alone.
They are not alone. But I'm curious, so how did your childhood influence your career choice then? Because this is this a midlife career choice? I mean,
So, well, it is yes, it actually was a bit of a midlife career, but it happened completely by happenstance. And I had worked, as you mentioned, I went to Stanford, and then I worked in several high tech startup companies, typically as the first employee,
mm,
and built the organizational structure and all of the what they call back office. And I was burned out in that. And my father-in-law, who had run a business his entire life, had been CEO of a business, and he had retired. And he was struggling with his own personal finances because he'd always had someone in his company who took care of them for him.
mm.
And my husband and I visited for his 75th birthday, visited Dallas where he lived. And then we went back in July for my mother-in-law's 75th birthday. And in that short window of time, Dad, as I called him, was markedly, it was very obvious that he was really struggling. And I said, Dad, I can help you with this because I had just left my job and at one of the startups. And I started going to Dallas for a week at a time for once a month. And I did that for 5 years and helped him. His home office was, you couldn't even find the floor. Things were in such a mess. And it took me a long time to get it all organized and structured and where I could help him with doing things on the internet from California. And as a result of that, a friend in Oklahoma knew what I was doing for him. And she actually was a family therapist. And she had a client who thought she was literally, she thought as she said, the sheriff was going to come knocking at her door.
Yeah.
And she said, I know someone who can help you. And the client called me that day and asked if I could come help her. And it turned out I was going to be in Texas the next week. And I said, I will drive to Oklahoma City and help you. And that was the beginning of my business.
Huh. It's a great story. So before you got into this, though, you had something else going on in your book. You had another business, you had other endeavors. But I want to go back to that childhood for a moment because that really, in the book, you really talk about how one's childhood experience with money, usually from one's parents,
Right.
can have a huge influence on you for the rest of your life if you're not aware of it. So
Yes.
can you like tell us a little bit about that and how what your backstory was? Because I know it's in the book and folks you can read it, but now spoiler alert, we're gonna hear a little bit right now from Terry.
Yeah. So I came from a family of women who ended up being left to their own resources without a man in their lives. My great grandmothers, which of course was in the early 1900s when men did not go off and leave their families, but my great grandfather did.
Huh.
He apparently had a drinking problem and he would go off on drunk binges and come back and get enough money from his wife to go back out again. And so he wasn't involved much in my grandmother's life, who would of course been the child. And my great grandmother died when my grandmother was 16.
Yeah.
And so then my grandmother had somewhat of a similar story where um, her husband left to go work in the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Depression and went to another state with the idea that he would send money home and come back. He did neither.
Yeah.
And so she was left with two young girls that she had to support on her own, and she did. And she was a school teacher by day and worked in as a waitress in a restaurant until 9 o'clock at night. And so those girls pretty much raised themselves. And so my mother when I was born, she was 19 and I had a 4-year-old brother.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had amazing grandparents who helped raise me. But she also had no education because she had had to quit school because of being pregnant. And so she managed as well as she could, but she just was ill-equipped to be able to take care of her little family. So it was generational, and I am so grateful to have been married 51 years to my husband, to have broken that part of the cycle.
So so you grew up basically having to fend for yourself? Is that fair or
No, my grandmother was there
your
for us.
grandmother was there?
Yes, yes. So, no, I did not have to fend for myself, but my mother was the lens through which my mother saw everything was money, and it was always, "We can't afford it." And so she was talking to my brother and I at very young ages about things we could not afford and why I think she felt the need to explain, why we couldn't have things, and yet to be, like, 4 years old and I remember, so vividly, there was a radio jingle. Remember the days of radio jingles?
Sure.
And the radio jingle was "Dial, dial for a loan." and back then DIAL, the word, the numbers for dial was the phone number. And I remember, I really do remember this. I said, "Mommy, why don't we just dial for a loan if we need money?" And she went into this elaborate explanation of paying money back and interest and things that were so far beyond a 4-year-old's ability to comprehend. And still, those memories are there all these many years later because it made such an impression on me. And so money was everything as we were growing up. And if grandma hadn't made my clothes, she sewed all my clothes,
Hmm.
even though she had a full-time job. But she managed to make all my clothes, and I have such fond memories of those beautiful clothes she made for me. But now that I'm an adult, I imagine she did that to help mom out financially.
Because she couldn't afford
Yeah,
clothes.
yeah. She
No. Well, it's a great story. I can see how it's influenced you, and being able to afford things it's part of our culture. How do we afford things? And one of the things that we cannot afford to lose are our sponsors. And so, with that in mind, I want to hear from our sponsors and what they can tell you can afford. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. And we are back, the Dr. Joe Show. Glad you guys are here and listening as we talk about money with Tari K. Vickery, the author of this really great book. Folks, first of all, Terry, the book hasn't come out yet, right? I mean, we're doing previews now, which is great. When's it coming out?
the publishing date is May 5th, but pre-orders can be made wherever books are sold, and then it will be shipped to buyers on the publishing date.
Publishing date. It's great. Folks, really look it up as soon as you can, because there is a lot here. There's so many different areas. The first part is part one, where we find ourselves, and chapter one, how did we get here? So Terry, let's talk about that. Money is ubiquitous, but it's this idea of what, having things, being safe, not being safe. How did we get here?
Well, through evolution, for one thing.
Yeah.
I think so much of our attitudes around money are formed from our childhood, as we were just talking about. And, whether money was talked about or wasn't talked about in our home, and in what way was it talked about? As children, did we only learn about money through hearing our parents argue about maybe how money was spent? Or we felt the anxiety. There's one story in the book where a brother and sister had just a completely different response to the home life they grew up in. And yet the undercurrent they felt was kind of deep in them, so that the daughter, when she had a good job and earned her own money and was financially set, she bought a new car. And she was just fraught with anxiety over buying that car. She paid cash for it, which she had plenty of cash, but she and her brother were talking later about it, and she described how painful it was, and he said, "I just don't understand this. Why was this so painful? You have plenty of money." And excuse my roosters. She said, it reduced my bank account, and it was just painful to her.
But the way you describe it in the book, is this the one where she is it's all in cash, and she's
Yeah.
counting
No,
out?
no, no, the
Is
the
that a
pay
different story?
paid for the car in cash was mine.
That was yours, counting
That
out
was
the
mine,
$100
yeah, that
bills,
that
right?
was a lot of fun
So
back well, keep
let's
in
hear
mind
that
the
one.
price of cars in those days.
Yeah, yeah. But again, this idea, money is a resource, right? It's something that we have evolved a need for, just like getting a mango. I mean, we need to have these resources in our lives. And for some people, it they basically inherited some of them. I mean, we certainly know people who've done that and what they've done with that. Other people can't even conceive that they would even get to that point where they would not have the angst that you described, the anxiety.
Well,
So is that part of how we got here in terms of our evolution? Is there a biological component to, I mean, the emotional side of money?
I think there is. I also tell the story of a family with 3 sons that I started working with the kids when they were maybe 12, 10, 12, and 14, and, help them set up their bank accounts and help the parents decide how much to give in the way of allowance and what things they would pay for, and these 3 boys could not have been more different,
Mm.
and I came to the conclusion that they simply were hardwired differently.
Really?
The youngest, they got their allowance on Fridays. By Thursday night, the youngest had maybe 50 cents in his bank account week after week, and the, middle child just kept building his bank account. He bought what he needed. It was just there was no issue around money for him. And the oldest was on top of his money. He knew exactly how much he had on any given day of the week, how much he had left for the week. But he ended up building up some amount of bank account, but he was a lot more concerned about it and and involved in his money and thinking about his money and planning for things. So these 3 kids, of course, were raised they were very close in ages, raised with the same parents, had the same experiences virtually of, whatever had happened within the family dynamics, and yet they had such different approaches to money, and to this day, they're all 3 now graduated from college, and they all 3 still do. They just followed that trajectory their entire lives.
So what's your take on that? We have these 3 basic styles of the way we manage money. We spend it, we save it, or we then just think about it. I mean,
Yeah, I think it had well, I mean, one thing that could make a difference is I've often heard that no 2 children are born to the same parents, which by that is the idea that they're born at a different point in the parents' lives,
I
and so therefore the parents are somewhat different. But you would think that values are very, the values they're watching and they're learning are the same. And so what else how else would you explain it? And that's where I just come to the idea that they're hardwired differently. They're just born differently.
you know, we had a guest a while ago who wrote about the different love languages.
Mhm. Oh,
And
yes.
I'm wondering whether there's a similarity here, the different languages about money.
Very
Um,
much so. Yes. And so that brings us to an interesting point that you have 2 individuals who have grown up with whatever they've grown up thinking the way their parents approached money was is the only way it's done because they don't ever talk to anybody about it to find out that there are other ways to think about it. And so they come together in whatever form they come together. They develop a partnership, maybe a marriage, and they typically don't talk about money because they've been taught all their lives that it's rude to talk about money. We don't talk about money outside our family, and then they come together to form their own union or family, and they don't talk about money. And so consequently, they each think the way their parents did it is the way you should think about it. And so many times they never talk about it to find out what's different. And so consequently, you've got these people who have come together and they have children. And the children are watching this unfold and they're watching the dynamics of the different types of thinking about money. And then they get a different idea. And then as we've talked about, the different point that they came into the world makes a difference and all of that.
it's interesting. We've had other guests talk about the way there are certain topics in families that not spoken about, like deaths and suicides and different things like that.
Mhm.
And by not talking about it, you send a message to your kids that you're not meant to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And why do you think that is? Why is talking about money rude?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it may have to do with fear.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fear involved. Fear of what will people think. So often I think money is used kind of as a measuring stick. and to figure out where we fit in the world and to assume where other people fit in the world. And we tend to, I think, particularly in America, which is the only world I know, but I think we often look at the trappings of money and assume that has particular meaning when what it may mean is these people are in debt to their eyeballs.
Yeah. Right.
But this is how they choose to spend their money.
Right.
And so we create an idea of our own relationship to the other person and think of them as having more or having less. And but we create this dynamic in our relationships. And then of course nobody talks about it. And because nobody talks about it, there's no way to test our assumptions.
Yeah. It's interesting because the I am approach, as you know, is basically saying we're doing the best we can, but that
Yes.
every person wants the same thing, which is to feel valued by somebody else. And certainly the word value and money certainly go together.
Right.
So is there part of that? Is it the fear, the shame that I don't have enough, that my neighbor has more than me? I mean, we
I
have
I I think
fun.
the fear is, what will they think of me?
What will they
If
think?
they only knew, what would they think of me? If they only knew I had so much debt, what would they think of me? If they only knew I don't manage my money, if they only knew I don't open my bills, if they only knew, on and on and on it goes. And I think there's a self questioning. And that's why in the book I say it has taken every experience we've ever had in our lives to be the person we are today.
Sure.
And where I personally spent so much of my life feeling like I needed to make sure I got fixed.
Mhm.
Um, for lack of a better word, that's an Oklahoma term.
Eh,
But that there was something wrong with me that I never could get beyond. And when I realized that it because all of these experiences made me who I am today, and I am able to truly love myself today, then I could let go of that sense that I needed to change things or I needed to overcome things because I can embrace those things and be grateful for them because they made me who I am today. And certainly the upbringing, the struggles my mom had, and then later problems that my husband and I had where we lost everything we owned, we lost our lifestyle. Um, it was so painful. And yet today I can be grateful for every bit of it.
it I think there are some people who may not have that ability.
I didn't think I did either. So
Yeah.
I well understand. It's just been probably in the last 5 years, maybe 7, that I've come to this place. So it's taken a long time, and that's why I see the book as truly a roadmap to financial wellness. It's to help readers and listeners understand that if they will go through the pain of figuring out why they think about money the way they do, then that will open the door to their ability to let go of the things that have caused them so much anxiety.
It's so true. The more insight we have into who we are and why we do what we do, the more we can change. How are you meant to change things if you don't know why you're doing them, right?
Yes.
And of course, not to make a pun of it, but change is all about money. But change is also what we do around this time as we change from chatting with each other to listening to our sponsors. So let's make that change. Let's hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show. Thank you, Larry, over there in the studio. It's great. We couldn't do this without WATD and the support that they give us. It's so appreciated. And part of that support, it's not financial support, although our sponsors do that. It's believing in us and valuing us. And I'm wondering how that also plays into this. Do some people worry that, as we talked about, their debt, that they'll be devalued and seen as less than? what about those folks who hide their money and hide how much wealth they actually have? What about that, Terry?
Yes, I have a wonderful example of that with one of my young clients. I started with working with her when she was 13. I had worked with her mother and grandmother for many years, and so when she was 13, I suggested to her mother that, first place, we knew she was going to be a very wealthy person by virtue of the fact that she was the only grandchild on both sides of the family, and there was wealth on both sides of the family. And I told the mother, "We need to get started on this. She needs to understand what it's like to manage her money and her wealth." And, she's now 22 and lives in London and doing a postdoc work, and, sh she learned that, uh, she realized very young she had a lot more money than most people her age because her, one grandmother died at 102 and went ahead and divided her estate between the daughter and the granddaughter. So this child, of course, it's obviously in trust, but she deals with that very much, and we talk a lot about that because she is afraid to she did an overseas program in London before she went over there for her grad work, and she was very concerned about her classmates knowing what kind of wealth she had, and she literally buys her clothes at a thrift store.
Really?
um, she didn't have a cell phone till she was a junior in high school. She just has somehow managed to put the money aside in her mind and live her best life. She doesn't need more money than she spends, but she is very concerned about people knowing how much money she has.
But why do you think that is? Is that they will judge her, that they'll take advantage of her, that they'll they'll lump her and, well, all these people with money are arrogant and you can't trust them. Is that part of it?
I think that all of the above, but I do think the fear of judgment.
Mm.
And then maybe we internalize how would we judge somebody who had a lot of money, and therefore we don't want to be judged that way. Maybe we make an again assumptions of what we think people would what they might think about us or what they might do, or as you say, will they try to take advantage of us? And will it create a separation, particularly for her at her age, where she's young, and the delta is huge. She doesn't want to be. She wants to be included. She doesn't want to be set aside, and she's maybe afraid of what other people might, how they might view her differently.
And it gets back again to what is it like when you have more resources than somebody else? Because
Yeah,
that's really part of it, that we worry that we will be seen as, I don't know, arrogant or vulnerable if we don't. Go
I
on.
think we're concerned that people. It's not just. It is all of that, but I think it's also. There's a wonderful story about a woman who came from a family that didn't have a lot of wealth, and her husband was, an engineer in a high-tech startup and did quite well financially, and she described how, something as simple as, a niece was graduating from college, and she was talking with her mother and her brother about what they were all going to do for as a gift, and she had planned to give the niece $100 as a gift. And the mother and the brother were each going to give her $200. And she internalized that to mean they would think something, they would think poorly of her if she gave $100, which was her intention, rather than giving at least as much as they had given since she has so much more money than they have.
I appreciate the pun though,
Yeah.
poorly her, because right,
Yes, yes,
that's a good one.
yes.
Yeah.
But that's how we kind of play games in our mind, and we kind of try to get inside other people's heads.
Yeah. So if people know I have money and I'm not giving, then I'm seen as a selfish person
Exactly.
as opposed to a giving person. what about all those folks who don't have money but still give?
Yes, yes. I had a wonderful, wonderful client who did exactly that. And it's not and it's sometimes it's giving to charities and sometimes it's giving to typically adult children, who are just struggling in life and even to the detriment of their own financial well-being. Um, those are 2 completely different situations because giving to charity there's something about the need to be seen
Yeah.
as, a large donor. This particular client was served on a lot of boards, and typically serving on a board comes with some kind of financial expectation, but it's usually relatively small. And he gave enormous amounts of money to the organizations for whom he served on their boards that he didn't have. I mean, he had it in the moment, but he needed it for for his ongoing retirement. And then he also gave to an adult child who had children. And I see a lot of situations where when your adult child has children, there's a sense of needing to protect the grandchildren. And if the parent, your child, who is the parent of the grandchildren, is struggling financially, the grandparents worry about how this is going to impact the grandchildren, and if they have it. But again, they might have it today, but not necessarily long term. They kind of can't help themselves, and it's extremely painful and difficult to tell their adult children that they're not going to continue.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. And in the book also, there are parts where you say, depending on who you're spending the money on, makes it
Yes.
either more difficult or easier to spend. Like, can you talk more about that? Because I think it feeds right into the parents and the children and the grandchildren.
And the grandchildren, yes, yes, and I talk about how, maybe at certain, dates seem to have an interesting dynamic to them where, maybe for an anniversary, you'll go out to dinner, and then for a 25th anniversary, you'll do a cruise or something
Mm.
huge, and there's just something that there's almost a feeling that because of it being this particular timing event, we need to do something different to commemorate whatever it might be. The other thing with grandchildren, I love the story I tell about my own granddaughter who was lived in Africa, and I found this adorable little pink ballerina dress when she was 2. And of course, I knew she was going to outgrow it quickly, and the dress was a reasonable price. It wasn't terribly expensive, but it cost me a fortune to get it to her in Africa.
Right.
And far more, maybe 3 times as much as the dress cost, and I didn't care. I just simply did not care, even though spending money on other things was, I gave it a lot of thought. When it comes to buying for my granddaughter, it is so much fun, and I I do not think about the amount, and it's just something that brings me great joy, and I do it.
Yeah. I probably shouldn't say this on the air, but I hope my kids are listening and hear that because we are looking forward to grandchildren. We're happy to spend whatever we can on them, folks. So, but there is the again the emotional side of money. There are these different attributions depending on the relationship component
Exactly.
to it,
Yes.
right? Which is fascinating. At the end of each chapter, you ask the reader, you have these things, something to think about.
Yes.
It Folks, get the book because it's really worth thinking about these things. We don't think about money. We don't think about how we're spending it, why we're spending it, how we're saving it, what we want to do with these things. And yet, there's a whole financial world out there that is very powerful and has a huge influence on us if we don't think about these things.
And I
So,
would add, we don't think about how we think about it.
yeah,
We
agreed.
we don't ever stop and think, "Wait a minute, why do I do that?"
Yeah,
What's making this make me anxious? We just don't self-reflect on it.
yeah. And as a psychiatrist, I can't help wondering why we don't. Why don't we reflect on these things? I think again, part of it is our childhood. We're just not taught or encouraged to talk about it. And many kids, if you don't think your parents are talking about it, the message is don't talk about it.
That's exactly right. The other thing that sometimes happens is kids overhear parents talking about a relative
And
and how he doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together or whatever, and it's said with a tone of voice, and it's just a maybe an off the cuff comment the parents make. The kids are listening, and they pick up on those things, and they process them through whatever age their little brains are at the time, and sometimes it gets really confusing, and they never get an opportunity to straighten out those thoughts and to understand what was really meant by that.
yeah. So in your role then, what's the actual title of your role? Not an author. You're a financial analyst. You're a consultant.
That is that's a wonderful question. I've struggled with that for almost the whole 25 years that I've been in business because it's not a role that is clearly defined.
Yeah.
And I do not it's not financial analyst and it's not it's not financial advisor. I do financial advising, but it is more I consider it family financial management.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual work, many of our clients, mail comes to my post office box, so they don't have to handle anything. My team and I just completely, if it's car tag renewals or insurance claims, it does not matter what paying bills, whatever it is, we just completely take care of it.
How interesting. Uh, but you told a story early on of a man who ran a business, and all of a sudden the business wasn't there, and he had to start doing it himself. So how do you teach them how to do it? God forbid when they have to.
Well, it's very individualized. So the man you're referring to was 75. And, he'd always had someone in his business take care of his finances, so when he retired, he literally ended up in the emergency room thinking he was having a heart attack
No.
because of the anxiety over money, and over he thought he had not paid an insurance policy premium, and therefore the policy had lapsed, which was not right. He had it set up on it was set up on automatic payments, but he that was what took sent him to the hospital. And so for him, I was able to go through his files and color coordinate them. He was in Texas and I was in Oklahoma. I mean, I was in California, and I was able to set up things for online banking where I could at least watch whatever he was doing and kind of provide a safety net for him. So it's varied by virtue of where people are in their own technological expertise, but he learned to do all of his online banking and everything at 75. And then as he got older and wasn't able to continue doing it, I had everything in place where I could just take over for him.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like it's really never too late to learn how to manage your money. And what's great is it's never too late to take a commercial break. So we're gonna do that, and we'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. Larry, it's all yours. And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show. I can't help the pun. We're in our final quarter as we're talking about money, and this conversation is making a lot of sense. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. It's in quarter. All right, I'll stop. So off air, Terry and I we're talking about a really important topic, which is a conversation between kids and their parents, especially maybe even their aging parents, and what's happening in the future, but also just the whole idea of how do you as a parent talk with your kid about money. So Terry, let's hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So one of the things I have observed is a lot of parents in what I call the middle generation. Uh, a lot of those folks, they don't know where their parents stand.
Yeah.
Their aging parents. They don't know if they're what their thoughts are on how they're going to age. Do they want to age at home? Do they want to go into maybe one of these three-tiered retirement communities? Do they have enough money to do that? I have actually seen a situation where the the mother, the oldest generation, was able to get into the retirement home situation, but eventually she ran out of money.
Yeah.
And her children, one of her children, had co-signed, and consequently, they ended up needing to pay her expenses for a while.
Mm.
So at the same time that we're at a point with our own children, our younger children, who are having needs, and we're probably in our greatest earning capacity of our lives, and we're thinking about our family that direction, we also sometimes need to be thinking about our family in the other direction. And when money has never been talked about with that generation, it is excruciatingly painful sometimes to try to open that conversation. And there is enormous fear of what am I going to find out?
Mhm.
And then the parents are afraid of what are my kids going to find out? What they don't know that I have a lot of debt, or they don't know that I don't have anything saved for retirement. And I don't want them to know. I don't want them worrying about it. I hear that over and over. But
Mm.
and going the other direction, if we were talking to our young children about money from the time they were little, and it was just something like, what are we going to do this weekend? It was as common as that kind of conversation. And when we're in a store shopping, something comes up and we use that as a learning experience, an opportunity. If that had been going on all their years of their life, there never needs to be one kind of sit down, let me tell you about money conversation that is not going to be adequate.
Yeah.
So it goes
Because
both directions.
both directions, absolutely. I mean, I think about what we did with our kids. We got 4 kids, and we wanted to pay for their colleges,
Mhm.
right? So that they wouldn't have debt when they came out. Um, but now when I've got all 4 of them in front of me, I'll say, "That's a quarter of my retirement account, another quarter of my retirement account," you know, but not the expectation, but the idea that, you know, parents want to provide for their kids, and we were fortunate enough that we could. I mean, we had to pay off our debt to do that. But there are some folks who still are so afraid to even make that investment in not just their kids, but in themselves.
Yes.
H how do we help them with that? Because, folks, the book is The Emotional Side of Money, a roadmap to financial wellness, but what we're really talking about is how do you even start that roadmap if you're not talking about the emotional side of money? And that's really what we've been talking about. Go ahead.
I would go back a step further to if you're not talking about it, but if you're not thinking about it.
Mm,
If you're not thinking about how did I get to this place in my own life, then you don't have an opportunity to make a difference in your own life.
yeah. Yeah. It's such a great topic to be talking about, and it affects everyone. It is universal. Money is this idea of being valued. Money is the idea of having opportunities, of hoping for things that maybe other people can't hope for,
And getting needs met too.
and
You know,
getting needs
and
met.
and so many times we have an underlying need, but we haven't brought it to the surface.
Yeah. And again, talking to a psychiatrist, this is part of what we do a lot, really.
Yes.
So with that in mind, we're talking about the I am approach, and we're talking about now the money and the I am. Remember, the I am is saying we're always doing the best we can, influenced and responding to the 4 domains of your home domain. We're talking about that today. The social domain, which is everything else, talking about that. Those 2 domains are outside. Then the internal domains of your biological domain of your brain and body. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Or in this case, are you anxious about money? And then the I see domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Human beings very interested in what other people think or feel, called the empathy. But what we really want to know is, what are you thinking about me? And do you see me as valuable? Not just financial value, but who you are as a person and what you contribute to society. So because the 4 domains interact, there are 2 truths to the I am. The first truth, small changes can have big effects. You don't need to change everything. A small change can have a big effect. In this case, you put money in the bank or you take it out can have an effect. So Terry, given what we're talking about tonight, what small change do you recommend to our listeners?
I think the most important small change you can make is to start thinking about what you think about money.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, maybe think about what's your first memory of money? Um, where did my ideas originate? What can I look back on the way money was dealt with my parents and my grandparents? Who can I talk to of those generations to explain how money was thought about in those generations? And maybe what childhood events do I still remember all these many years later that that kind of make me that take my breath away? And so by thinking about it, I call it putting on the front burner
Yeah.
of what is it? How did I personally get to this place where money in so many cases causes me angst and um, a lot of agony. By starting down that path, you start pulling on a thread and unwinding what else might come later.
Yeah. And putting it on the front burner makes sense because it really is your prefrontal cortex. It is the front part of your brain. It's the thinking part that is managing those emotions that you have in your limbic system. And all those memories are based in the limbic system and how they've influenced you. So that's a great idea, folks. Think about those first early experiences with money, what small change that might have made for you. The second truth of the I am, everyone's got one. Everyone is interested through their IC domain, what you think or feel about them, which has an effect on their biological domain, because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. And you are part of someone's home or social domain. So the second truth of the I am, you control no one, but you influence everyone. And you get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Tari K. Vickery, author of The Emotional Side of Money, a roadmap to financial wellness. What kind of influence do you want to be?
Mm, thank you for asking that. I I want to give people hope and awareness that they can change their relationship with money and alleviate the pain and anxiety that comes just with the thought of opening a bill or whatever it is, whatever component of it is that causes them that level of anxiety.
So how do you do that? How do you do that? People buy the book, but how are you helping them? How are you making that change for them?
Well, I certainly see it in my clients. Um, and that, of course, was the impetus for the book because people for whom it is just so difficult to think about money, when they have an outlet, they have somebody they can talk to. And with clients, of course, it's me. But that maybe it's a trusted friend, maybe it's a spouse or a partner. But I also encourage people to make sure they know what they think about money before they start trying to talk to other people because the other person comes with their own ideas and you don't want to get those all tangled up. So it's really important to do the first thing we talked about and to know what you think and why you think that so that then you can have a meaningful conversation with other people. Certainly therapists. I mean, I've had a number of clients who have taken me with them to their therapist because they felt like I could help their therapist understand the incredible extent of the um, behavioral issues that they know come from their relationship with money. And they've wanted me to help explain that to the therapist.
That's remarkable. And how did the therapist take that?
Typically, they referred me to other clients.
That's good.
Yes.
That's good. It's just a different approach, Terry,
Mhm.
because you hear about financial analysts and, wealth managers and all these folks. I've never heard them address the emotional side
Mm,
other than saying, this will help you feel more secure. But that doesn't really
what's secure? That's different for every person as to
yeah.
what it would take to feel secure. I often think of it as thinking about seeing a young child maybe sitting on a curb crying. It's a child you don't know. But you see you have a heart for this child, and so you sit down next to her and you put your arm around her and you say, "Sweetheart, tell me, why are you crying?
Mm,
What's hurting?" And then doing that with ourselves.
yeah.
Just remember, "Sweetheart, what's causing you to cry? What's causing you this pain?" And being open with finding out, and then you can do something about it.
Great. It's great. Great way to end the show. Folks, The Emotional Side of Money by Tari K. Vickery. Pick it up. It's coming out in May. Terry, thanks so much for being here tonight and sharing
You're
your
very
wealth
welcome.
of information.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great.
Just a show